The Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutras are a classical collection of Sanskrit sutras on the theory and practice of yoga. It's considered to be the standard and foundation of yogic knowledge. The Yoga Sutras were written by the Indian sage Patanjali about 2,000 years ago. And he sort of organized, collected, and gathered older traditions and put them together in a digestible sort of way, which we now refer to as the Yoga Sutras. The Vedas, which are a group of philosophical scriptures that date back 4,000 years ago, with the Rig Veda, and even older than that. That's just the written part of it, it goes back potentially 10,000 years or so. So these traditions are very old, and there is a particularly one part in the Yoga Sutras that I really find interesting, and it's the section that is called the means of attaining experience. It's chapter 4, verse 1 through 3. And it's all about thinning the veils. It's all about thinning the veils, the methods of opening the barrier between our typical waking state of consciousness and the layers that are underneath, or that we consider transcendent, higher, or beyond the current aperture in which we use to experience ourselves and our world around us. So there is this website, Swamiji.com, that sort of analyzes this chapter and sort of elaborates on what Patanjali meant. And this is very interesting for anyone that's into psychic stuff or psychedelic stuff, because this is all here crammed into this little chapter. So it starts by explaining that barriers were built by a filling in process. These barriers are constructed somewhat like a blueprint or a house that gradually gets filled in from the ground to the foundation, to the walls, to then the roof. So that stage after stage, layer after layer, our final construction as a completed human begins taking place. So like you think back into life when all these experiences you're going through, you build up walls, you build up identities that help you process these experiences that we've had in life, to make sense of our situations. And we need to reverse this process by removing the veil. We talked about thinning the veil. So the way that we remove the veil is by following the process of veiling and projecting in reverse order, going inward instead of outward, because, our attention is constantly being grabbed by the external stimuli that we come in contact with. We very rarely shut this off and don't allow our attention to be stolen. We very rarely go inside and allow our attention to be completely focused on one single pointed centerness. So by following these steps and projecting in the reverse order, going inward instead of outward, self-realization comes. It becomes the knowledge of the self begins to chip away and be revealed to you. It does not mean disassembling the house, but tracing our awareness back through the stages of construction. Because so much of these emotional walls we build up to hide ourselves from trauma or whatever is unconscious, This is an unconscious thing that we do. So we need to become conscious of our behaviors and trace these things back. Opening the gate of the self, experiencing the eternal truth or self, is a process of allowing the natural consciousness to flow forward. Much like a farmer opening a sluice gate to irrigate a field. So in the same way, we need to open a gate to our inner selves. This is what the intention of going inward is to remove these walls, these emotional walls that we've built up, so that the flow of consciousness just sort of emerges and creates depth, spiritual depth, rather than a process of further construction of new information, new identities, new thises and new that's. In other words, we cannot build or construct self-realization. We can only allow it to naturally flow forward when the barriers are removed. And I have a little bit trouble with some of these Sanskrit words, so bear with me. The meaning of Kaivalya, the 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutras, is entitled Kaivalya Pada. The word Kaivalya literally translates to isolation. A lot of people take this to mean something like liberation or enlightenment, but isolation is actually a very effective term because pure consciousness, or what is called Purusha, is now standing alone, separate from all of the manifestations of Prakriti, including literally all of the manifestations or swirlings of all levels of the mind field. All temporary manifestations that we see in this world, according to the realizations of yoga, are mind stuff. It's all mind stuff. It's manifestations or swirlings of the mind field. In Sutra 1, chapter 116, supreme non-attachment is mentioned as a stage beyond the many other levels of attachment. Let's read that again. Supreme non-attachment is mentioned as a stage beyond the many other levels of attachment. Sutra chapter 432 explains how the primary elements called gunas have finished their purpose and recede into perfect equilibrium into that which they arose. These are aspects or byproducts of the process of isolation, or pure. It's the process. These are the aspects or byproduct of the process of isolating your pure consciousness into, again, the single centeredness that we mentioned earlier. You know how we said how often do we just grab a hold of our attention and force it into what we're going to go next to? These are different attainments that come from spiritual practice. And these are ways that you can get these attainments, like we mentioned earlier, the spiritual clarity, the psychic realization, or in what India they call siddhis, these powers, these spiritual powers you get. So there are 5 methods by which the barrier of ignorance is dissipated or thinned or removed entirely, allowing self-realization or liberation or whatever to flow in, consciousness to be realized as not a isolated individual, but as a flow of infinity. So the different things are, in Sanskrit, janma. Janma means birth. So some people attain these things naturally. Ausadhi. Asadhi means herbs, light-filled herbs, I've heard it described in other translations. Divine plants, which in my interpretation is psychedelics. You know, we see these things talked about in the very early scriptures in the Vedas, like the Rig Veda, which is the oldest foundation of Hinduism that we find, the oldest written scriptures we find. And of course, it's all hymns to a divine psychedelic brew, perhaps something similar to like ayahuasca, which we find in the Amazon. The next one is mantra. Mantra is a divine vibration or sound or song or incantation or spell that you use to singulate your consciousness, again, to a single pointed center of awareness. You repeat these words, for example, Ram, 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 Ram. All the things you're thinking of go away. They fade into Ram, 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 Ram. You do this for 20 years. You get to some very far out places, and that state, that kaivalya, the isolation of consciousness, becomes much easier to attain because our attention is like very ADHD. You know, we're always looking around and always constantly being pulled in a million directions. So these are different ways to not be pulled in those directions. Tapa means training the senses or austerity. Sometimes you see these guys in India go really far out. They'll put their hand up in the air and never take it down. So their bones and stuff get all twisted, and this is their way of disciplining themselves. So through this crazy discipline, through loosening the attachments to the body by saying, I'm so disciplined that I'm going to release my attachment to this body. I'm not my arm. What difference does it make if it's up or down or this or that? So this is tapa. And then there's samadhi. You might have heard this word, samadhi, which means something like deep concentration or meditation, you know, the state of meditation. Samadhi, you know, you hear of Mahasamadhi, where these sadhus or holy people meditate and they just leave their body and they're just stuck in this permanent state of meditation. Mahasamadhi. Then there is what's called Ja, which means, again, born. And then there is Siddhya, which means attainments, powers, perfections, subtle experiences, psychic abilities. Okay, so then we're going to now elaborate on what some of these things mean even deeper. For example, the first one, Janman, which means birth. Some rare people have the natural ability to drop the veil between consciousness and unconsciousness. Recall that in the sutras, chapter 119 to 20, two kinds of people were mentioned. First, were those who naturally are predisposed by virtue of having attained a high level of experience in a previous life. Through that, though the experience was not complete, so they came back to finish it in this lifetime. Or the second one were those who, like most of us, need to follow a path of faith, energy, memory, concentration, and knowledge. Here in this part of the sutra, it is simply being acknowledged that some experience beyond the barrier or veil by virtue of birth. So you can just be born with this. Some people are naturally just gifted with these abilities to have this clarity through birth. Now the herbs, there is said to be an ancient elixir that when ingested breaks down this barrier. It is also said to be an elixir in the subtle aspect of our own being. At a more surface level, we are all familiar with the way in which various drugs or chemicals break down the barrier between the realized and unrealized, the conscious and the unconscious. Throughout spiritual and religious history of humanity, herbs have been used responsibly in this way by many cultures. While we are not suggesting drug use as a means to spiritual realization, it would not be complete if it is not mentioned as one of the ways that the barrier can be removed from the conscious and unconscious. In the light of herbs as a mean of removing the barrier, it is imperative to remember that the foundation principles are non-attachment in attaining a natural state of tranquility. That way in which ancient herbs used is vastly different than drug abuse and addiction today that we see. So basically, you know, these shamans, you can look at them as being shamans. And I do look at Hinduism as being a shamanic culture. And there are many shamanic cultures alive who don't look at these experiences as being drug-induced experiences, but they look at these as being deities personified through nature. You know, you look at what is disrespectfully known as pagan traditions, who saw God as not being some entity separate from the ground that we are walking on, but something to be realized in all things. And this is a realization in Hinduism, that God is actually lurking in all moments, in all things, in all lessons. There is a spiritual essence waiting for you to notice it. And these plants, I mean, you can look at my YouTube channel, I speak about this all the time, are one of the most powerful and legitimate ways to gain spiritual clarity, especially in a world where we are absolutely and utterly lost to consumerism, into things that have got us so far gone that spiritual practice seems almost primitive in a way, but these plants, these light-filled herbs really do have potential to profoundly awaken you to something incredibly mysterious and divine. You can think of some of the modern expressions of this today, like the ayahuasca cult of that's happening now all throughout the Amazon and in the U.S. Many people are waking up to this realization. The Shipibo behind me is a Shipibo tapestry, which displays the ayahuasca visions. We have the Wiraricas, who make art such as this, which their medicine is all sorts of medicine actually, but peyote mostly. But they also have a plant which is also found in all over the world actually. We call it here in the U.S. angel's trumpet. In Mexico it's known as florpondio in Spanish, or in the indigenous words in the Amazon is known by toé, or in India known by datura, which today is still given as an offering to Shiva. Most people don't understand why, but it's because it's a very powerful psychedelic plant that can reveal Shiva to you. It can reveal the truth. It can reveal truth. And Shiva is the original yogi, the original shaman. Shiva is the original shaman because there's a story of the churning of the cosmic ocean where all poisons begin. So the demons and demigods are churning this cosmic ocean with a giant serpent. They're pulling it one way and pulling it another way. And through this tug of war, all these different cosmic poisons began coming from the oceans, the depths of this universe that we are in. And it began killing everybody. So they begged Shiva, please, Mahadev, save the universe. We're all dying. And Shiva took all the poisons and drank them. And it's said that datura was one of those poisons, and it's a very toxic plant. But shamans all around the world have used to use this plant for all kinds of spiritual practices, And India, although forgotten, is no different. And you can see these plants offered to Shiva today. And that's the reason why, is because if you trace it back far enough, there was shamanism. Hinduism is a shamanic religion. It's all about reaching altered states of consciousness through different methods. And one of those other methods is the next one, mantra. Here, the use of mantra goes beyond being just a religious prayer or sort of like an affirmation. And those things are useful and very great. The constant repetition or awareness of mantra is like the persistent tapping on a closed door. Eventually, the door is open. Eventually you tap on a door in an infinite space, the door will eventually open. The mantra goes further, not only opening the door, but also becoming a guide into the deepest, subtlest, absolute reality in which arose in the first place. Use the vibration of your own self to connect to the vibration of the start of everything. Scientists call it the Big Bang. Use the vibration of your own inner voice, your outer voice, to match the primordial sound. Tapas, training your senses. It seems that we humans are engaged in our relationship with the external world, except when we lose consciousness completely in sleep. Tapas means training the senses, and this can be done gently in daily life. You don't have to go live in a cave or put your arm up forever or take on oaths of silence. If you not only train your senses, but strongly restrict engagement of the senses, attention will decidingly come inward if it has nothing to obsess over outwardly. One is the gentle way. While one is living an attractive life in the world, the other extreme is those who have renounced the world and are willing to suffer any consequence to substantially speed up the process of going inward to attain direct experience. If we know we are a part of something mysterious, that our inner worlds are a mystery, waiting for us to undig it, if we know this, it's interesting that all of our focuses are so easily captivated. Some other bullshit that's, we get enchanted so easily by bullshit. when like the real stuff is needs nothing, it requires nothing. So much of our lives is about becoming. It's so much about using something. What can we get out of something? But the truth is, we already have everything we need. It's just waiting silently, like a mother just like holding a child, waiting for it to become conscious enough to go on with life. And it's just holding us. And in Hinduism, they call this Maya, the goddess of Maya, who is the goddess of illusion. She keeps you not lost in illusion, but we are lost in her. And she's holding us in a way. A lot of people look at Maya as being like a negative thing. And you even hear some like spiritual elitists be like, oh, you're so lost in Maya. But it's actually a beautiful thing, because Maya is the space in which allows you to awaken. It's the fishbowl in which holds your self-awakening, your self-awareness. Maybe fishbowl is the wrong word, because you're not in anything. Maya is an illusionary fishbowl, but just keeping it's our safety net. And the next one is samadhi, concentration. Concentration. The path of samadhi is well outlined in the Yoga Sutras. It's actually very popular. In particular, it's explained in the 8 runes of Ashtanga Yoga, chapter 229. Systematically, step by step, the veils are encountered, explored, pierced, and gone beyond, one after another. Samyama is 3-part process of concentration, which in Sanskrit is known as dharana or dhyan, which is meditation. The samadhi is taken together. So concentration and meditation is samadhi. When samadhi is available, the finer tool, when concentration is available, the finer tool for piercing the subtle veils of that cloud that blocks our center of awareness. All these identities that block us from the truth of who we are through concentration and meditation can be dispersed. And through all of these different methods, siddhis are exposed. Attainments, powers, perfections, subtle experiences, psychic abilities are exposed from the subtle levels by thinning the veils between the conscious and the unconscious. And you don't only find this in Hinduism, you find this in all shamanic cultures. They speak of these. Sometimes they're called brujos, sometimes they're even just called curanderos, or the many different names. It's no different here. The people that have found these techniques and all around the world, they've all come to similar conclusions. Is that we are lost in language, and this language keeps us bound to an illusion of time. We see the world through a past, present, future, I'm stuck in this current moment type of reality because of our language. It's because our language has a factor that keeps us bound to this. So people that transcend these attachments and transcend these illusions of language, for example, we see a tree and dirt as being 2 different things, but they are actually one thing because they are inseparable from each other. We see our hand and our brain as being 2 different things, but really they are inseparable from each other. They are implied within the oneness of which they are, but we are lost in this language of illusion. So the shamans, the yogis, the holy men, the mystics that have come to these realizations, that have done these methods, are beyond that. They can see things that we don't see. The veil is thinned. And you can achieve all kinds of powers, apparently. And a lot of people, they say, get caught in this stage, and they never reach enlightenment because they get enchanted by the powers that they get. You hear about the Aghori in India, for example. These guys are smoking Datura still today. They say a lot of these guys have powers and are really lost in that. The transition or transformation into form into another form or type of birth takes place through the fulfilling of an innate nature. This is the next chapter. The transition or transformation into another form, you're taking another birth, the type of birth that you're going to take takes place through the fulfilling in their innate nature. So your innate nature, your vibe, you can say, oh, that guy's got a bad vibe. His nature is a little weird, you know? So we can say your vibe, your vibration, your innate essence of what you are vibrating in becomes crystallized. It takes birth in a place that resonates with that vibration, you know? It's like a musical octave. You play within a key. If you're out of key, you're not going to manifest in this key because you're not even in this key. So you can only crystallize in the key that you are in. So your innate nature determines your spiritual development in this lifetime. Your essence, your current state of where you're at determines your next state. Neem Karoli Babaji used to say that if you think of a mango at the time of death, you come back as a fruit fly. So, filling in is like the blueprint of a building. The process of filling in is somewhat like having a blueprint of a building. First, you design the building on paper. Then you go to the land to stake off the outline, start digging, and begin construction. Step by step, you fill in so as to complete the finished building as you laid out in the blueprint. Similarly, we start with the blueprint in a casual level of our being, from which we then fill in with the subtlest material. So as we become a complete whole person, we mentioned this earlier. Trace your way back to enlightenment. We mentioned this again too. Tracing your way back. Ramana Maharshi is very famous for brilliantly describing these practices, in which he called self-inquiry. And that means to trace your root. Trace your root. Trace your I thought. All these thoughts that you have. I'm hungry. I'm horny. I'm hateful. I'm happy. I'm hungry. I'm this. I'm that. I'm blah, blah, blah. I got to piss. I got to do this. All these crazy things. Ramana Maharshi said, let all that shit go because you can only lose what's not you. So trace it back. Trace it back. What's the essence? What's the center? Trace your way back to enlightenment. Go inward. The significance of this filling in process is understanding that enlightenment comes by awareness tracing its way back in reverse. While the current sutra is describing the filling in process as the way in which manifestation occurs, so attachment, if you desire a mango at the time of death, that attachment makes manifestation occur. As a fruit fly, for example. So this filling in process makes manifestation occur. It is the next sutra, chapter 4.3, that describes how to reverse this filling in process so as to realize the truth that has always been there forever, all along. Recall that the first few sutras of the Yoga Sutra explains the process of gaining mastery over modifications of the mind field, and that then the true self shines through. Filling in comes with birth. The same process of filling in comes when one incarnates into the body. You know, how can we undo all of this karma that we are entangled in? Through our parents, through their parents, through their parents, through their parents. There is this infinite cycle of being told who we are, which we really aren't. They say that we pay for the sins of our fathers. How much pain is echoing from our family lineages? How far back does that go? Can we break it through our own self-realization? This filling in process, can we be the ones that stop it? Incidental causes or actions do not lead to the emergence of attainments. Incidental causes or actions do not lead to the emergence of attainments or realization, but rather come by the removal of obstacles, much like the way a farmer removes a barrier, so to naturally allow the irrigation of his field. The same picture painted earlier. This website's cool, right, Swamiji? So this is the symbol of Ganesh, the son of Shiva, overcoming obstacles. Even today in India, people pray to Ganesh for simple things of like passing a test or getting a visa or all kinds of things. We are taught that only action brings learning. In daily life, it seems that most events happen because of some other action first occurring. We are trained from birth that we must do something to cause some other thing to happen. This is karma. This is cause and effect. If we want an effect, we have to perform some kind of causation action. If we want to build a house, we have to bring together the bricks and boards and make it all come together. This is the way we are taught in our families and schools and our society in general. Whether building a house, a relationship, a family, or a spiritual life, we are taught we must learn more so that we can build more. While this is definitely true in the outer world, the opposite is true in the pursuit of spiritual clarity, or what some people call enlightenment. Learning how to unlearn. When we apply this process of learning to our spiritual evolution, we can easily and mistakenly think that the process is the same. We can unintentionally become mere actors on a stage, only pretending to be loving and kind towards others. We develop a spiritual persona as if the mask is the meaning of enlightenment. What is more true is that our innate nature is already pure, perfect, or divine. If that is so, then why do we not experience it and have that true self, that direct experience of our core being realized, our inner divinity? And the reason is because of those obstacles or barriers that are blocking the inner light. These false identifications that we were talking about that are being echoed from forever ago. What we need to learn is how to remove those obstacles so that pre-existing reality, the essence of reality, in which these obstacles are falsely being identified as reality, can shine forth. It is not a process of learning so as to build more, but a process of learning how to unlearn and experience what has forever been there and what will be there when this temporary experience that we call ourselves in our life disappears. The essence, the God state. Oop, I didn't mean to click that one, sorry. Okay, so this is where the story of the farmer comes in. The farmer will have many, many rows of plants, all of which need water. The farmer does not just carry bucket after bucket of water to the plants, nor does he walk around with a long hose for watering. Rather, you design a system so that there's a little door or a pile of dirt that at the beginning of each row that there are your little gates. Imagine a stream that passes by the area. When he wants the water to go down to a certain row, he simply opens the floodgates or moves that little pile away with his hand. And that makes the water naturally flow in the row, and all the plants get nourished. Meditation is just like this. In meditation, we are not trying to attain anything, but we are trying to open the gates so that the water can naturally flow, the waters of consciousness. We cannot really attain anything in meditation, but can only realize what is already there. So much of us, and I had this experience once where I was meditating and I realized how stupid I was because I was sitting on this train in India and I was like meditating and I was like, oh my God, man, I'm actually meditating right now. I'm not thinking. I'm not even thinking. I was like, oh my God, I finally did it. I'm in a space of not thinking. How cool. This is so cool. And then I finally just started busting out laughing because I realized I was thinking about thinking. I was thinking about how I wasn't thinking. And I was like, oh my God, man, I just, the mask that this was talking about. So you can't really attain anything. We're not trying to attain something in meditation. We're actually just trying to realize what's already there. And this is why the phrase self-realization is used for enlightenment. We definitely have to learn the methods and apply them. But it is imperative that we remember we are trying to open, encounter, and set aside so that our true self can come shining through, just like the farmer watering the field, opening the gate. I find this Yoga Sutra and this especially this website's interpretations of it to be very interesting and very thought provoking, you know. And I find it super interesting that we ignore so much of these qualities of shamanism. But all of these, to me, are methods of shamanism. These are all profound techniques that have been realized over and over and over and over again. And we really, we hold the fruits of these knowledge as being the standard of spirituality. We hold Hinduism, you look around the world, people look at monks and sadhus as being the standard of spirituality, of really attaining something. But we so often discredit these original sages that passed this knowledge down thousands of years ago. We look at it as being almost new age or demonic, or, just all the different preconceptions and ideas we have about these things that we have lost touch in. Our shamanic roots, our beautiful methods in getting in touch with that primordial space that we don't even really acknowledge in life. So I thought this would be interesting to share with you guys. I guess we can call it the psychic and psychedelic experience in Sanatana Dharma and yoga. And I want to do more videos about this. And I also want to do more videos about different plants that are used throughout history to invoke these spaces, and talk about their history, the uses, and the academic side of these things too. So if you're interested in hearing more about the shamanic side of yoga, or hearing more about these plants in which are used in spirituality and shamanism, which is synonymous with each other, then please click subscribe, turn on the notifications, and that's all. That's all for this episode. I really appreciate you, and I hope you enjoyed. I go live here on YouTube sometimes, and I have a Facebook page, Dakota Wint, Instagram, all that stuff. So cue the music, baby. Let's do it. Dakota, see ya.